භාගයයි කලක් පවතින අලුත් පෙනුමයි.
Tonight, growing concerns. India believes China's involvement in the port city project could pose a threat to Indian interests and a close watch is necessary. A sensitive matter. The epidemiology chief transferred out of the unit amid mounting criticism over COVID death reporting.
This information is now being collected by two sources and this information is finally reconciled between the two organizations.
Handbrake. The Sri Lanka Medical Association urges the president not to go ahead with the planned easing of travel restrictions. Black mark. Another policeman implicated in a mega drug smuggling racket. All that and much more coming up on First at 9. This Saturday, the 19th of June, 2021.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වලකයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammik Ekanaik. Now, the Indian Navy has become the latest entity to express concern on China's involvement in Sri Lanka's Colombo Port City project. Its Vice Chief of Naval Staff, G. Ashok Kumar, has said that China's links to the project could pose a threat to India's interests in the region and a close watch is necessary. The comments come after a spokesperson of India's Ministry of External Affairs said on Thursday that the country expects Sri Lanka to be mindful of its ties with India, including mutual security.
Vice Chief of the Naval Staff of the Indian Navy, Vice Admiral G. Ashok Kumar, is quoted saying today that China's involvement in Sri Lanka's port city project could pose a threat to Indian interests in the region, and there is a need to keep a close watch on such activities. In an interview, Vice Admiral Kumar said, quote, "If you want to analyze whether it is a threat or not, it is a very difficult question. But the fact that when somebody is external to the region starts showing so much interest, even though they might have rational reasons to do so as the majority of the energy sources pass through this region, is it a logical thing for nations to do? Yes. Could that pose a threat to us? It could. We just need to ensure that it is being closely watched." Unquote. When asked if the Indian Navy is keeping a close watch on the activities, Vice Admiral Kumar had replied in the affirmative and said that the scrutiny falls on the entire region. The Indian Vice Chief of the Naval Staff comments come at the heels of India saying that it expects Sri Lanka to remain mindful of its ties with India, given the involvement of China in the Colombo Port City project.
Regarding the Colombo Port City project, we have been closely following recent developments from our security perspective. We have also noted the concerns that have been raised in Sri Lanka regarding several aspects of the framework for the Colombo Port City project. We expect Sri Lanka will remain mindful of our excellent bilateral cooperation, including for mutual security in our shared environment, which includes the maritime domain. As regards our projects, India has a very extensive portfolio of development partnership projects in Sri Lanka, and we are in regular contact with Sri Lankan authorities regarding the implementation of these projects.
ඔබේ මූල්‍ය අවශ්‍යතාවයන්ට ගැලපෙන සැලසුම් අපි ලබා දෙනවා. අවම පොලි අනුපාතය යටතේ ලබා දෙන මූල්‍ය පහසුකම් සුරක්ෂිත තැනකින් ඔබට ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන්. වැඩි විස්තර සඳහා ළඟම බැංකුවක් වෙත යන්න.
Now, taking a look at the pandemic situation, Chief of the Epidemiology Unit, Dr. SUDATH was transferred out of the unit today. The move comes at a time when the Health Ministry's COVID death reporting mechanism has come under severe fire. Dr. SAMITHA, who was at the National Dengue Control Unit, was appointed as the acting director of the Epidemiology Unit.
The concerns are high after the Delta variant of COVID-19, which is highly transmissible, was found from the community in Sri Lanka. The strand, which originated in India, is responsible for wreaking havoc there, contributing to a massive daily surge of new cases and deaths. Unlike a full lockdown of the country implemented during the first wave of the virus last year, the government has opted for travel restrictions in a bid to keep the country's economy running. Last year's lockdown led to minus growth and questions arise whether Sri Lanka can sustain another. Whether the variant of the virus presently taking hold of the island is virulent or not, health authorities say that the best weapon to combat it lies with the people.
These viruses are capable of transmitting the disease compared to the so-called traditional variants or the normal virus that we are known to. However, this increased transmissibility is happening only when there is free room for transmission. That means if we are washing our hands frequently, if we are keeping our distance, and if we are refraining from gathering in public places unnecessarily, and if we are wearing our face mask continuously and accurately, then even the new variants cannot penetrate through those barriers. As public, what is required is to adhere to the required health guidelines much more than what we used to do in the past. And as a result, there is a very high probability that this new variant can die within the community. However, if you don't adhere, there is a high chance of spreading this into other parts of the country, and more people might get affected.
Further, with the detection of the Delta variant from the area of Dematagora, the Colombo Municipal Council decided to administer the Sinopharm vaccine to the residents in the relevant area. The Delta variant's detection put the people there in the high-risk category. The medical officer of health responsible for the area of Dematagora said that from the PCR tests conducted yesterday, 15 returned positive results. However, he stated that the samples had been sent to the Allergy, Immunology and Cell Biology unit at the Sri Jayawardhanapura University to ascertain which variant of COVID-19 was responsible for the infections. In the meantime, the World Health Organization says that the Delta variant of COVID-19 first identified in India is becoming the globally dominant variant of the disease. Britain has reported a steep rise in infections with the Delta variant, while Germany's top public health official predicted it would rapidly become the dominant variant there, despite rising vaccination rates.
The whole situation is so dynamic because of the variants that are now circulating, and the Delta variant is well on its way to becoming the dominant variant globally because of its significantly increased transmissibility. We need more data, again, from well-designed studies on the efficacy of the different vaccines that are in use in different countries against the different variants.
On the island's vaccination front, 77,562 persons were administered with either the Sinopharm, AstraZeneca or Sputnik vaccine. The WHO's chief scientist Soumya Swaminathan meanwhile voiced disappointment in the failure of the German biopharmaceutical company CureVac's vaccine candidate in a trial to meet the WHO's efficacy standard, in particularly as high transmissible variants boost the need for new, effective shots. Coronavirus variants were cited by CureVac when the company this week reported its vaccine proved only 47% effective at preventing the disease, shy of the WHO's 50% benchmark. The company said it documented at least 13 variants circulating within its study population.
It was disappointing to see the results from CureVac that came with an efficacy of less than 50%, which is the benchmark that we had set. WHO had developed through the R&D blueprint to prevent epidemics very early on the target product profiles for an effective and safe vaccine.
The methodology in reporting COVID-related deaths has come under fire recently, with it also drawing the wrath of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. With that being the case, Chief Epidemiologist at the Epidemiology Unit, Dr. SUDATH SAMARAWEERA, was transferred out of the unit today. He is now the Director of the National Dengue Control Unit, while Dr. SAMITHA GINIGE, who was previously part of the NDCU, is now the Acting Director of the Epidemiology Unit. In this backdrop, Deputy Director General of Education and Research at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Hemantha Herath, says that a twofold method is put in place to ensure that accurate numbers pertaining to COVID-related fatalities are reported on a daily basis.
The Ministry of Health has taken several steps to improve the reporting of the COVID-19 related deaths. We have initiated a process in which the immediate reporting of or active surveillance of deaths occurred or reported during the past 24 hours has been now collected by a separate unit in the Ministry of Health, and this information is further processed by the epidemiological unit. Depending on the numbers reported, we can go back and get the fine details from the respective hospitals on the number of deaths reported from each hospitals through this active surveillance system. So therefore, this information is now being collected by two sources, and this information is finally reconciled between the two organizations, and therefore there will be more accurate information collected and published in future.
In the meantime, Sri Lanka's tally of COVID-19 deaths rose by 54 to 2,534 yesterday. As for yesterday's caseload, there were 2,349 fresh infections in the island. A majority of the infections were confirmed from the Western Province, with 871. District-wise, Colombo reported 493 cases, the highest from any district. In contrast, the lowest number of cases were recorded from the Mathura district, with just 9 infections. Also included in yesterday's caseload are 22 imported cases. As for COVID recoveries, 2,134 patients were given the all-clear today to leave their treatment centres, taking the overall number of recoveries in Sri Lanka to 199,393. With 1,420 new COVID-19 infections being confirmed today, the country's number of active cases stand at 34,960.
Now, with the easing of island-wide travel restrictions just around the corner, police are advising people to limit unnecessary movements while urging not to abuse the freedom of movement. Despite the planned easing of the restrictions at 4 a.m. on Monday, inter-provincial travel continues to be off-limits.
The travel restrictions which are currently enforced island-wide will be eased on Monday the 21st at 4 a.m. and will be reimposed at 10 a.m. on Wednesday the 23rd until 4 a.m. on Friday the 25th. However, there is no change in inter-provincial travel restrictions as they will be in place until further notice. Also, mass gatherings, public gatherings, events and parties will continue to be prohibited, given the country is still recording daily cases in the excess of 2,000. Meanwhile, police also advise people to follow health protocols to the letter when moving about following the easing of restrictions. Police media spokesperson DIG Ajit Rohana, whilst urging the public to practice self-discipline, instructed the heads of public and private institutions to facilitate online work for their employees and to only summon the minimum required cadre to office. Meanwhile, in line with the easing of the restrictions, the Ministry of Agriculture has decided to open the economic centres for business under strict health guidelines.
අස්නාහිර පලාතෙන් පිටත තිබෙන කැප්පෙටිපොළ නුවර එළිය ඇබිලිපිටිය තම්බුත්තේගම දඹුල්ල ආර්ථික මධ්‍යස්ථාන නැවත අපි ජූනි මාසයේ 22 වෙනිදා විවෘත කරනවා. ඒ වගේම කොළඹ සහ බස්නාහිර පළාත ඇතුළත තියෙන සියලුම ආර්ථික මධ්‍යස්ථාන 23 වෙනිදා විවෘත කිරීම සඳහා අපිට දැනට අවසරය ලැබිලා තියෙනවා. ජනතාවට අවශ්‍ය එළවලු පළතුරු අධික මුදලට විකිණීම අපිට ආරංචි වුණොත් නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න පාරිභෝගික අධිකාරිය හරහා ඒ වගේම පොලිසියත් හරහා කරන්න අපිට සිද්ධ වෙනවා කියන එක කිව යුතුයි.
Meanwhile, the Department of Railways has decided to operate trains within the provincial limits during the 3 days when the travel restriction will be eased. With the onset of the weekend today, the expected reduction of vehicle numbers entering the city of Colombo was seen. However, given the fact that the country is under travel restrictions, the traffic entering Colombo was still on the high side.
Now, the Sri Lanka Medical Association has written to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today requesting not to go ahead with the easing of travel restrictions planned for Monday the 21st. The association believes that despite being somewhat of an imperfect lockdown, it prevented a much larger number of deaths, averting significant suffering of the people. The association notes that lifting the lockdown even for a few days is likely to take the country back to the major pandemic situation which prevailed back in April this year. It went on to say that the gains made by imposing travel restrictions for the last 3 weeks will be of no use if the restrictions are lifted on the 21st. Any wrong move, the association says, will take the country much longer to recover and a tremendous effort on the part of all stakeholders involved to return the country even to this level of control once more. Now, Italy has decided to keep the ban on arrivals from Sri Lanka in place. People arriving in Italy from India and Bangladesh are also affected by the move. The country has also introduced mandatory testing and a 5-day quarantine for visitors from Britain. The new measures are set to come into force on Monday. A sub-inspector of police attached to the Kalutara police station was arrested this morning while transporting over 52 kilograms of heroin. A crime prevention division operation aided by a tip-off has led to the arrest of the sub-inspector and 2 other suspects.
The Crime Prevention Division of the police headquarters had launched an operation yesterday to arrest a sub-inspector attached to the Kalutara South police station. They had been tipped off that the police officer in question was involved in transporting drugs.
ලැබිච්ච තොරතුරු සම්බන්ධයෙන් දින 6කට ආසන්න කාලයක් විශ්ලේෂණය කරා. පොලිස් නිලධාරියෙක් සම්බන්ධ වූ බවට තොරතුරු ලැබිච්ච නිසාම මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන් ඉතාම රහසිගත විමර්ශනයක් කිරීමට අපි තීරණය කළා. කිසිම ආකාරයකින් ඒ පුද්ගලයාට මිදී යාමට බැරි විදියට විශේෂ ජාලයක් පොලිස් නිලධාරීන් අපි යෙදෙව්වා.
During the operation, the sub-inspector in question had allegedly accepted parcels, which the police say was heroin, from a certain place in the area of Habaraduwa in Galle. The police had followed the suspect's vehicle and had arrested him in the area of Gonapinuwala in Hikkaduwa. During the search of the vehicle that followed, the police had found 52.728 kilograms of heroin packed in 2 black travelling bags. At the time, the sub-inspector had been in police uniform. It is also alleged that the suspect had been paid 2 million rupees for smuggling drugs on a previous occasion. During interrogations, the suspect had revealed that on prior occasions, the drugs were transported via the expressway and was handed over to a group who waited for the consignment near the expressway entrance in Aturugiriya. Going by the sub-inspector's statement, the police was able to apprehend 2 more suspects, aged 42 and 26, near the expressway entrance in Aturugiriya. The police seized the vehicles used by the sub-inspector and the 2 suspects. Measures were also taken to interdict the sub-inspector embroiled in the racketeering. Meanwhile, preliminary investigations have revealed that the drugs belongs to a racketeer identified as Salindu Malshrita.
මේ මද්‍රව්‍ය ජාවාරම් පිටපස් සිටින ප්‍රධානම ජාවාරම් කරු හැටියට අඳුරගෙන තියෙන්නේ සලින්දු මල්ශිත නැමැති 25 ඇවිරිදි පුද්ගලයෙක්. මොහු ප්‍රථම වතාවට 2015 වර්ෂයේදී පානදුර ප්‍රදේශයේදී හෙරොයින් ග්‍රෑම් 15ක් සමග අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීමක් සිදු කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ අවස්ථාවේදී මොහුගේ වයස අවුරුදු 19යි. ඉන්පසු දැනට යම්කිසි විදේශීය රටක හෝ යම්කිසි ස්ථානයක සිටින බවට අපිට තොරතුරු ලැබිලා තියෙනවා.
In the meantime, Galle Magistrate's Court has issued a detention order this evening to further question the interdicted sub-inspector.
The Consumer Affairs Authority has issued a Gazette notification yesterday removing the maximum retail price imposed on coconuts based on their circumference. It rescinds the previous Gazette notification on the maximum retail price for coconut published last year. According to the previous Gazette, the maximum retail price for coconut with circumference over 13 inches was 70 rupees per nut. Also, the prices for coconuts with circumference between 12 to 13 inches and below 12 inches were 65 and 60 rupees per nut respectively. However, following the issuance of the new Gazette, there will no longer be a maximum retail price for coconuts. The Lanka Phosphate Company Limited has been removed from the purview of the Ministry of Industries and gazetted under the Ministry of Agriculture. The relevant Gazette Extraordinary was issued by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa with effect from last Thursday.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has amended the functions, responsibilities and institutions coming under the purview of the Ministry of Industries and the Ministry of Agriculture via a Gazette Extraordinary effective from the 17th of June. The Gazette published yesterday amends the Extraordinary Gazette number 2187/27 issued on the 9th of August in 2020. Following the amendment, the Sri Lanka Phosphate Company Limited, which was previously under the purview of the Ministry of Industries, is under the Ministry of Agriculture. In the aftermath of the move, Minister of Industries Vimal Weerawansa expressed dismay at the Sri Lanka Phosphate Company being removed from his purview. He says that after the entity was brought under him, it was transformed from a loss-making entity to a profit-generating one. While adding that he never took on new staff to the company or influenced its daily operations, Minister Weerawansa expressed hope that the entity will generate profit in the future as well.
We will see you once more on the other side of this break. Bear with us. Welcome back to First at 9. Now, oil futures ended higher yesterday, with prices recouping much of the losses from a day earlier that were blamed on strength in the dollar following a shift in tone by the Federal Reserve this week. West Texas Intermediate crude for July delivery rose 60 cents to settle at $71.64 a barrel on the New York Mercantile Exchange, lifting the U.S. crude benchmark up 1% for the week following Thursday's 1.5% loss. The global benchmark, August Brent crude, rose 43 cents at $73.51 a barrel on ICE Futures Europe. Brent was up 1.1% for the week. On Wednesday, WTI crude saw the highest front-month contract settlement since October 2018, while Brent ended that session at the highest since April 2019, but prices for both contracts fell sharply on Thursday. The three main Wall Street indices all finished sharply lower yesterday after investors were spooked by hawkish interest rate comments by Federal Reserve official James Bullard. The blue-chip Dow and the benchmark S&P 500, which started the week at record closing levels, slumped after President of the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bullard said he was among the 7 officials who saw rate increases beginning next year to contain inflation. Inflation and how the U.S. Central Bank will tackle it as the country comes out of the pandemic had been front and center of investors' minds in the run-up to this weekend's Fed policy meeting. Now, therefore, since the Fed on Wednesday projected interest rate hikes would happen sooner than previously expected and signaled it was reaching the point where it could begin talking about tapering its massive stimulus as opposed to just thinking about it, Wall Street's main indices have struggled. Bullard's comments spiked the CBOE volatility index, Wall Street's fear gauge, which initially hit its highest level since the 21st of May before dropping back a touch. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 533.37 points to 33,290.08. The S&P 500 lost 55.41 points to 4,166.45. And the Nasdaq Composite dropped 130.97 points to 14,030.38. The Colombo Stock Exchange has announced changes in the S&P SL20 index constituents made by S&P Dow Jones indices at the 2021 mid-year rebalance. The exclusions and inclusions as announced by the S&P Dow Jones indices are effective from the 21st of June, following the market closure on the 18th of June this year. Axis Engineering plc, Commercial Bank of Ceylon plc, Non-Voting, DFCC Bank plc, Distilleries Company of Sri Lanka plc and People's Leasing and Finance plc are excluded from the effective date. Among the inclusions are Brown and Company plc, LB Finance plc, Richard Pearis and Company plc and Valuable One plc. Now, in foreign news, Iran's foreign minister announced today that Judge Ibrahim Raisi is the country's new elected president. Outgoing Iranian President Hassan Rouhani congratulated hardline Judge Raisi, who was heading for a landslide win in Iran's presidential election today. With some 90% of the 28.6 million ballots cast in a turnout of 48% already counted, Raisi's tally was 17.8 million. The 60-year-old, who is subject to U.S. sanctions for alleged human rights abuses, had been widely tipped to win the contest thanks to the endorsement of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. He becomes the president in a critical time for the country. Iran and 6 major powers are in talks to revive their 2015 nuclear deal after then U.S. President Donald Trump abandoned the deal in 2018 and reimposed crippling sanctions that have squeezed Iran's oil income. Raisi offered no detailed political or economic program during his election campaign, but has backed the revival of the nuclear pact, a development that would bring an easing of U.S. sanctions that have crushed the country's economy. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.